everyone, Val Evans here, and thanks for joining me for another edition of Forensic Astrologer. And today we're going to look at Amber Heard's solar chart for 2022. We'll also look at her solar chart for 2015. We'll be able to pick up some clues. One of the big things that I'm seeing is how women are becoming famous by supporting Johnny Depp, and that's actually in Amber Heard's solar chart for 2022. And we'll also be able to determine who is really lying and who is going to win. We'll take a look at some of the things that happened to her in that infamous year where she was dealing with a lot of what she alleges abuse and problems with her husband. What the solar return does is it predicts your year. It shows where you'll have good luck and who you might argue with, who might sue you, and ultimately if you're going to win. Now, this chart will show many different themes for her entire year. It won't just include her case. Many people have different opinions about looking at the solar return versus the solar return with a birth chart. But to keep it simple, we're going to just use a solar return, which I find very, very helpful looking at whether it's a crime or even your own solar return chart. As a side note, in Chinese astrology, Amber Heard is a tiger, and it being a tiger year can show misfortune in many areas of life, including money and love. It's considered a bad luck year for Amber, but she's a new mom and may represent new beginnings. When you're looking at a court case, you would typically refer to the 6th house of lawsuits and the 9th house of courts. To determine the court profile, I'm going to use the ruler of the 9th, and it's in the 12th. And that might indicate that there's confusion in the court. With Jupiter conjunct Neptune, it represents unclear or confusion. It could show a hung jury. The T-square also might indicate a hung jury. You might be able to see that the jury could be negatively influenced by Depp's team and the audience as they jeer Amber behind him. You could also look at the 11th house as far as success with court cases, and Saturn in Amber's chart indicates many delays and little success in her own lawsuit. The method to finding a husband in a solar chart like Amber's is to look at where the descendant falls and the Lord, which is Venus in this chart. The descendant falls in Libra. So we're going to want to look at Jupiter and Venus for this chart, which represents Johnny, both planets, and the planet that will represent Amber is Mars. Jupiter is also traditionally considered one's mate, and Libra can represent someone who's being litigious. We'll look at Amber and Johnny in a second, but let's look at some big players in the chart, Pluto and Neptune. Pluto represents revenge, sex, jealousy, and excrement. Moon represents dog, so at the top of the chart, dog poop. Many jealous women are part of this theme too. They don't like Amber, and she's forced to look at them in a court of law. Neptune can show without boundaries, influencers, homosexuality, water, and of course, alcohol. The 12th house is a tough house, and it's very difficult when you have your ruling planet for the solar year, in her case, Mars, in the 12th house. Whether you have Moon in 12th house or any planet, it usually shows a loss. And with Venus there, it could be a year that will be punctuated by lost love. Chiron at the ascendant can show a deep pain. Maybe you're holding on to certain pains that are in the 12th house, and that's going to reverberate in this 12th. It's going to color that house for both Johnny and Amber. They're going to be talking about the pain, and it's going to also probably hurt her in a variety of ways. Also, Johnny too, or that he will be talking about how it hurt him and his career. When we see the North Node in crime charts and in any chart, you're going to see deception there, and that's in the 2nd house. It shows that the public is accepting his alibi, his deception, fame, and the public, which is what Moon represents, in such a close proximity to Pluto, that represents extreme fame. So in her chart, she's looking at maybe a lost love, a lost husband, and that person is extremely famous. Now, it may seem to some people that she is lying about money. However, this is her ruling planet, and it's not aspecting this stellium. It is aspecting Jupiter and Venus, which would represent a husband. Mars is going to, by the way, represent how she feels that year, which is probably a lot of anger. And so that would play out there. She's too far away from this tall tale here. And a tall tale, look at Uranus, very high tails, tall tails. So there's a lot of bad news just for her and her ex because of this 12th house. But the good news for Amber is that the sun represents the government, and it appears as if the government is in alignment with her. But it does not look as if the sun or the government is really in his favor. I do think that she will prevail in some way, and that has to do with the government. This stellium here with Uranus, it does appear that there's going to be some shocking deception during the trial. I think we've already seen that. So there will be a lot of discussion about lies, and in the later degrees of Taurus, that's close to Algol. So what does Algol represent? Well, alcohol, and can be a demon. It is the worst degree in the zodiac. Now what we're going to do is take a look at the 11th house. Now, Saturn in the 11th house, normally what I would say is that year for anyone who has Saturn in their 11th house, it might mean it means a deep freeze. The 11th house is, it can be online communities, and it can also mean friends. So unfortunately, what this shows is that a friend is just going to potentially not be there for her, and may even actually block some of the lies that are being told. So what's really interesting is she does have a former friend named Rocky that has come up. And I think that Saturn represents her because Saturn represents rocks. With that Neptune so strong, it shows so many cameras, so much influence, so much alcohol. And again, influence, Neptune, and with this sextile here, it's famous influencers or people, women who are getting famous, influencing. So it's a shame that that this would happen, and you can so clearly see it in this chart. The females are really getting a benefit from this trial. The public really does believe that his former wife cost him money, but it seems that this chart indicates the lawsuit is just for revenge. The 12th house also represents charity, so it makes sense that they're going to be talking about that. Here's the solar return for 2015, which was another very difficult year for Amber. And you can see how her moon, and if your moon is in your 12th house, in your solar return, it might mean that you'll lose your home. It might mean that you're feeling isolated and you essentially disappear. There are just things in your life that disappear. And that would be the case for Amber. Now, you can tell here that with Saturn, which rules the 7th house, and that would represent Johnny, he's in the 5th house. And what does the 5th house represent here? It represents a birthday party that went wrong. And it was essentially due to alcohol because of Neptune here. Now, this information would eventually make the headlines, which is the 9th house, and not only hurt her, but hurt both of them. This placement here would really show how things would go for her, and it would all start with that party. This triangle here is a grand trine, and Mars is it's anger. and right on Mercury, which is to speak. So it's a lot of angry emails, angry discussions, and how there's this flow between the dark energy of Black Moon Lilith and communication, the communication house. Also, the sister would be involved, another third house theme. And then trining Pluto. So there would be so much just constant all year. So a grand trine doesn't always mean a good thing when you see it. You have to make sure that the planets are benefic, and these certainly were very difficult planets. Jupiter, which represents Johnny, squaring Mars and Mercury would just show how angry he would be that year. And he would be right around her too, because he's in the first house. What I think is going to happen is that the sun is, to some extent, on her side. So the sun is sextiling her ruling planet, which is Mars. With this solar return, is not going to come out completely ahead. There's going to be a lot of pain, but I do think that the court will probably side with her, and there will be some good news for her in this year. Hope you enjoyed this edition of Forensic Astrologer. You can also find more cases on forensicastrologer.com.